Hi, everyone. Hoping that you all are doing well. Now is a good time for us to have a little discussion about Shem and Seth or Set and the United States Constitution, and by extension, state constitutions. Now, the problem we are dealing with right now with respect to this Shem, Seth, and Setism is that what has been established and is continuing to be established is a state religion. And so we've got a state religion being established under this Shem, Seth, Set umbrella. And what's going along with that is the establishment of a state racism. Now, what we are looking at with respect to Shem, Seth, and Set is the dynamic of the ism, ISM. You've seen this suffix before plenty of times, and we're going to talk about what isms are really all about, regardless of what you put in front of ism. What is really going on with respect to this construct of ism. And what we see with respect to Shem or Sem and Seth or Set in this ism dynamic is that this is about both religion and race. Now, it's primarily about religion because the racial construct actually is an outgrowth of the religious construct. Now, I have some resources that you can look at related to Sethianism, but we're just going to look at this etymology that has been provided. And by the way, it's very difficult to find straight etymologies for a number of these constructs. So that's very interesting because they've been elevated in so many ways. And so therefore you should be able to find all sorts of information, but it's not readily available. But we do have something that might be kind of helpful here. So with respect to this idea of Sethian, what we have is Seth and then Ian. And what's offered here is that this is a member of an ancient Christian Gnostic sect that venerated the biblical Seth. Okay. And so that entity, as we've discussed before, is that third son of Adam and Eve in the Genesis narrative. And this is related to the creation narrative and this idea of divine incarnation. And so that's what Sethian is coming out of. And so this construct is related to the Sethians, but also what you see at number 2, which is very important here, of or relating to the Egyptian god Set. And so these constructs are actually one and the same. And it's also important to consider some of the things we've discussed before related to Moses. Okay, so some synonyms of Sethian would be Setian, and then that Typhon Seth dynamic. And then antonyms, interestingly, are constructs related to Osiris or Horus. Okay, and so these are seen as the antithesis according to this offering here. And so with respect to Seth, we have the Sethianism, and Semitism and Shemitism are outgrowths of Sethian doctrine. And by the way, it's also very difficult to find significant information related to Semitism. But what we do know is that Semitism is coming from Semite, which is coming from Semi, which is coming from Shem, which is coming from Scripture. And so we can look into Scripture to see what this is all about. But again, some constructs that you would expect to see in Scripture are not in Scripture, such as the word Semite. Okay. You don't find Semitic. So here's this dictionary offering of a Semite, and it indicates a member of any of a number of peoples of ancient southwestern Asia, including the Akkadians, Phoenicians, Hebrews, and Arabs, and the descendants of these people. It also indicates a member of a modern people speaking a Semitic language. So we'll look at that also. But with respect to a Semite, it includes this comprehensive group of people: the Akkadians, the Phoenicians, the Hebrews, and the Arabs. Now, right now, there's a lot of propaganda going on that is in contrast to this, that distinguishes certain groups as Semite and excludes certain groups as Semites. But with respect to this particular definition, we have Semites including all of these collectives. And so anything related to Semite is related to all of these collectives, not just Arabs, not just Hebrews, not just Phoenicians, not just Akkadians. And here we have the construct of Semitic as an adjective coming out of Merriam-Webster, and it indicates Semitic is, number one, of, relating to, or constituting a subfamily of the Afro-Asiatic language family. So this is referring to language. And it's important to note that people are often identified by their language groups. And so, with respect to an ethnic group, the ethnic group is tied to the language, and the people are often called by the language. Okay, and so this is no exception. And so it goes on to indicate that this language family includes these four languages: Hebrew, Aramaic, Arabic, and Amharic. It goes on to indicate that this idea of Semitic is also of or relating to or characteristic of the Semites. And again, Semite is not a word that is found in Scripture. However, we have a general understanding of what we're talking about when we say Semite, because we've just discussed what a Semite is. And a Semite is an individual from the collectives that we just discussed. And so it includes all of them. So when you hear Semite, it's referring to all of them, anyone that falls under that umbrella, okay? Now we get to the second part of this construct related to the isms. And so we're looking here at ism. What is an ism? And of course, you see this construct of ism at the end of many words, and you see this ism related to a number of dynamics that we talk about in current times. And so you see racism, sexism, feminism, Catholicism, Semitism, anti-Semitism. Okay. And so when looking at Webster's dictionary, we see this offering for ism as a noun. And as a noun, it's indicated as a distinctive doctrine, cause, or theory. Number two, an oppressive and especially discriminatory attitude or belief. It goes on to indicate act, practice, process, a manner of action or behavior characteristic of a specific person or thing. Prejudice or discrimination on the basis of a specified attribute. And of course, if there is discrimination or prejudice based upon this specified attribute, race or sex in this particular offering, there is an entity that receives the benefit of this, and then there is an entity or entities that receive the liability of this. And so that's what ism is all about. And so whenever you see ism, it should serve as an alert, okay, to something. And oftentimes we see that it is an alert to something that is not completely positive. And here we have another aspect of ism. Ism is related to favoring. And so you see this favoritism. Okay, and so it's about favoring something or someone. And here we have in number one, favoritism as a noun, the showing of special favor or partiality. Number two, the state or fact of being a favorite. And so when you see that ism, it is generally often talking about this idea of favoritism related to the construct that comes before it. And so, again, if you see racism, it's related to that construct, race. If you see sexism, it's related to the construct of sex. If you see Semitism, it's related to the construct of Semite. Now, it can also be argued that the idea of ism is related to the state of something, a condition of something, a property or aspect or characteristic of something. It can also refer to an abnormal condition related to something. Now, in this dictionary offering for Semitism, we have a dual definition going on here. And so at number 1, we have 1A, Semitic character or qualities. And so we just discussed this with respect to Semitic. And so we know what Semitic means. And then at B, it indicates a characteristic feature of a Semitic language that might be occurring in another language. And so here you have the cultural dynamics related to Semitism. However, number 2 presents something distinct. And so with respect to number 2, we have something related again to that idea of doctrine or policy or theory. And so number 2 identifies Semitism as a policy or predisposition that is favorable specifically to Jews. And so when you look at that collective of Semitic people or Semite people, you see a broad collective. But with respect to Semitism, it is specifically referring only to a policy or predisposition favorable to Jews. What complicates matters even further are these dictionary definitions of Semitism and anti-Semitism. Because when you look at both definitions on their faces, what you see are constitutional issues. And so with respect to this definition of Semitism as a policy or predisposition favorable to Jews, if an institution, a school, an organization is engaging in such a policy, then you have constitutional issues. You have Title VI issues, you have Title VII issues. Also, for the alternative, this anti-Semitism definition that includes hostility and discrimination against Jews as a religious, ethnic, or racial group. This is also problematic in terms of the Constitution, Title VI, and Title VII. Both of these are problematic. What's also problematic is that there is limited conversation or understanding about what Semitism is all about. And so when individuals or organizations are talking about combating anti-Semitism, they really need to talk about the construct of Semitism so that we understand what this anti-Semitism is all about and the combating of anti-Semitism. What is that all about? Are we talking about anti-Semitism as discrimination against a particular person or a particular collective of people? Are we talking about anti a doctrine or a policy? What is it exactly that we are talking about? That's the thing that's missing, because this idea of anti-Semitism can be understood in multiple ways. What's missing again is the definition and the understanding, sort of a collective understanding of what Semitism is all about and whether a government entity should or should not be practicing Semitism, or whether a government entity should be insisting that other people practice this policy of favoritism. And so these things need to be addressed, but these are the things that are not being addressed. And so there is this focus on anti-Semitism that appears to relate to this hostility or discrimination. And that's what we are hearing about with respect to the protest, for instance, or with respect to some of the academic dynamics that have been going on. But we still need to get clarity about what type of Semitism we are talking about and what type of anti-Semitism we are talking about. And so, generally speaking, with respect to the expectations of leadership, the expectation is that there will be policies that are essentially equally applied, or that these policies have equity underpinning them. And so there's this idea of fairness that we are expecting with respect to government actions. There is this idea of justice that we are expecting with respect to government actions. And this can look different, in terms of different circumstances, different times. There may be a need for a policy or predisposition that is favorable to a particular group at a particular point in time based upon the government or leadership doing something that advanced a policy that was unfavorable to a particular group at a particular point in time. And so there is this need for equity, this need for fairness. Now, government entities, institutional entities, they need to be mindful of this with respect to the issue of Semitism. And so government entities should not be engaging in these policies or predispositions that are favorable to any particular group. There should be a focus on fairness. And what fairness, again, looks like in different situations is different. And so we have to be mindful of that also, because what's equitable for one person may not be the same thing that's equitable for another person. And again, we are looking for fairness. We are looking to take care of everyone. We are looking to make sure that everyone is cared for and everyone is receiving what they should be receiving as a part of the collective. And so we also need to be careful about the government or these institutions and organizations advancing policies or engaging in actions that appear to favor specific groups of people, whether we're talking about race, ethnicity, sex, whether we're talking about national origin, whether we're talking about ability, whether we're talking about age. We need to be careful and we need to be conscious. And so any policy also that involves hostility or discrimination against any particular group, that needs to be also carefully considered. Because again, all of these are going to be constitutional issues. But we also need to make sure that the government isn't, in its anti-policies, actually pushing the ism policy. And we also need to consider the fact that these definitions are very limited and they don't really encompass what we understand collectively about Semite and Semitic. And so, with respect to that, a number of people groups are excluded from these definitions. And so we have Semitism, but it is a policy or predisposition that's favorable to one specific collective of people identifying as Semitic. The Semitic umbrella is large. And we need to understand that when we are talking about Semitic or we're talking about Semitism, we need to understand that total umbrella. And it incorporates those language groups that we addressed originally. And so just by having a policy or predisposition that actually excludes those groups from the definition, that is also problematic. And so those groups need to be brought under this Semitic umbrella when talking about Semitism. The same thing applies for anti-Semitism. And so, with respect to anti Semitism, looking at this definition, it really should be a broader definition. It should involve hostility toward or discrimination against Semitic people, people from the Semitic language groups, people understood as Semitic related to their religion, their ethnicity, their race or caste system. And so there is a problem with these definitions. These definitions are too limited, and the definitions, by virtue of the way the definitions are constructed, these definitions indicate unfairness. These definitions indicate a policy of favoritism, a policy of exclusion. And so again, these dynamics are also problematic in terms of Title VI, Title VII, and the Constitution in general. Another dynamic of concern with respect to Semitism is that part of Semitism is the favoring of certain groups of people over other groups of people. And so governmental entities insisting that people be pro-Semitism is actually insisting that people be discriminatory. Because a part of Semitism, a part of Sethianism, is this idea, it's an Eastern idea. We're in the West, so they say. It is an Eastern idea. It is an Eastern doctrine, an Eastern theology related to what are known as the chosen ones. And so with respect to Semitism, part of the doctrine, part of the theories, they involve this idea of chosen ones. And so if someone is pro-Semitism, then one would be pro this theory or this doctrine about the chosen ones. And even if you haven't ever read scripture, you know that if there are chosen ones, there are also unchosen ones. And so that's also a part of Semitism. It includes this doctrine of denigration related to the unchosen ones. And so inherent to Semitism, inherent to Sethianism, is this discrimination, if you will, against unchosen ones. That's a part of the theory. There are certain collectives of people, certain individuals that are seen as the chosen ones, and everyone outside of that seen as the unchosen ones. Now, depending on which of the collectives we are talking about, the chosen ones might vary. What's interesting, of course, with Semitism is that there is an original collective of chosen ones, and then with Christianity, there's a replacement theology going on, wherein there's the belief for many Christians that they are the replacement chosen ones, and that there are these other entities that are outside of this grace this selection or this election. The other thing that we're going to look at is this idea of doctrine related to Shem, Seth, Set, and the isms. And so when you're looking at Semitism or Shemitism, Sethianism, what you are looking at is religious doctrine, because that's what ism is really all about. And so you're looking at religious doctrine and also race and caste doctrine. And so we've been talking about this whole dynamic of race and caste previously. However, with respect to this Shemism, Semitism, Sethianism, what we have is religious doctrine and race or caste doctrine. And the race or caste doctrine is embedded in the religious doctrine. So the race and caste doctrine is an outgrowth of this religious doctrine. And yes, when we see this in terms of a unified construct, we first see it in the book of Genesis. However, when you look at what's supposed to be Egyptian history, you also see these dynamics related to Sethianism. You see them as a religious doctrine and also a race and caste doctrine. And so what we also have is sort of this required reverence with respect to Semitism and Sethianism. So there is this required acceptance or embracing of a specific religious doctrine, a specific theory of theology. And here we have some helpful commentary related to the Establishment Clause. And it reads, "The First Amendment's Establishment Clause prohibits the government from making any law respecting an establishment of religion. This clause not only forbids the government from establishing an official religion, but it also prohibits the government from taking actions that unduly favor one religion over another religion. This clause also prohibits the government from unduly preferring religion over non-religion." And so, in other words, belief versus non-belief, or non-religion over religion. So there's the suggestion here that the government should keep its hands out of this particular dynamic. And so it should not be involved in religion. It should not be involved in creating a religion. It should not be involved in upholding a particular religion or preferencing a particular religion over another religion, or insisting that individuals believe in something or that they not believe in something. But with respect to this Sethian Semitism dynamic, we have a situation wherein certain actors in the government are pushing, preferencing, favoring a particular religious doctrine and insisting that others buy into this also. And so you see these actions that are coming up related to anti-Christianity or Christian bias. Christianity, again, is a doctrine. It is theology. And so simply not being on board with Christianity is not something that the government should be sanctioning. The government should not have its hands in anything like that. Now, that again is distinct from someone being mistreated or discriminated against because of their religion, or discriminated against because of their theology doctrines. It is important to remember that Sethianism and Semitism are related to religion. They are religion. And these dynamics that are going on with respect to prohibiting people from being anti a particular religion is in conflict with the Constitution in a number of ways, but specifically with respect to the First Amendment and what is known as the Establishment Clause. It indicates in the First Amendment that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. You can read Congress to mean the government, okay? Or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And so there's a lot going on here in the First Amendment, but we're going to just focus on this idea of religious doctrine. And so with respect to this, the government is not supposed to make rules establishing a religion or prohibiting people from the free exercise of religion. This includes not having religion at all. And so the government is not supposed to do anything to force individuals or collectives to have religion or to have a particular spirituality. And here you can see what Title VI is about. It indicates here education in Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VI, and race, color, or national origin discrimination. And race, of course, also includes ethnicity. It indicates here Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits discrimination based on race, color, or national origin in programs or activities that receive federal financial assistance. And so what is discussed here is specifically discrimination related to the idea of race, the racial construct, or the ethnicity construct, also color and national origin. And so with respect to Harvard, we have right here everything that is needed to address the concerns at Harvard without throwing in these extra words and constructs. And so we have assertions of discrimination based upon race. We have assertions of discrimination based upon national origin. And so we don't really have to include these other constructs to address what is going on at Harvard or at any other university. And so we have individuals who are making claims that they are being discriminated against based upon their race or their ethnicity. We have individuals who are claiming to be discriminated against because of their national origin. And so that is all that is needed. We don't need to add in all of these doctrines in terms of the discussion. And so what we need to be focusing on in terms of the Constitution is whether people are being discriminated against because of their actual identity or their perceived identity with respect to, in these cases, race, ethnicity, national origin. Are they being singled out because of that? Are they being treated unfairly because of that? That is supposed to be the focus, not on a doctrine that is distinct from an individual. A doctrine does not have standing to issue a complaint. The prohibitions also relate to other countries. Title VI is not about discriminating against a country. Title VI is about a person. Title VI is not about discriminating against a political theory. Title VI is about a person. And so when talking about Shemite or Sethite discrimination, that is not the same as anti-Semitism. So with respect to Title VI, we are supposed to be focused on the individuals and discrimination against individual people, not discrimination against a theory or a doctrine. And finally, another thing to consider with respect to collective functioning on the earth is that many people are treating other people in ways that they don't want to be treated. Many people are treating people in ways that are unfair, that are abusive. Many people have a sense of entitlement in this world. Many people are lacking in empathy, lacking in compassion. Many people are not operating in a way that's going to bring about a healthy world. Many people are not operating in a way that's going to bring about a healthy self. And so with respect to bringing up the next generation and healing the current generations, is that individuals should be encouraged to learn how to treat other people better than they want to be treated. Not how they want to be treated, but better. The reason for this is that many people believe or feel that they deserve bad treatment. And so we don't want them spreading that around. And so people need to be encouraged to treat other people in a manner that is above whatever it is that they think should be going on for themselves. With this, we will have people giving forth their best, hopefully, and people receiving the best. This can then foster a more healthy environment because everyone's putting forth their best and everyone's receiving of the best. People are not entitled to things that belong to other people. People are not entitled to abuse and mistreat other people simply because they feel like it. And so again, there needs to be a sort of re-education related to how we are supposed to interact with other people in the world. And of course, there is that option that we recently talked about with respect to resetting things and having people being in spaces that are conducive to whoever people happen to be. Being with like-minded people, being with like-spirited people, or whatever likeness it is that people believe they need to have around them for their communities. The way things are supposed to happen naturally is that we are supposed to have nations based upon birth. These nations are simply supposed to be extensions of family. And so when you have these extensions of family, you are more likely to have these like-minded individuals. You are likely to have individuals who understand the world in a similar way. You are less likely to have the types of conflicts that we have going on right now. And part of the reason we have these conflicts is because of problems with boundaries. There are many people who have boundary problems. All of the world conflicts throughout history can, generally speaking, be traced to boundary problems. Many people don't understand where they begin and where they end, and where others begin and where others end, and they have no respect for boundaries. They have no respect for the rights of other people. And for some people, everything is about them getting whatever it is that they need in this world. And we have a history of this over and over and over again. Part of the reason why we have diversity is because in many instances, individuals were violating these boundaries and encroaching on different collectives of people and taking things from other collectives of people, moving things around the world that perhaps should not be moved around the world. And then on top of this, we have this diversity going on, but then we have poor diversity management. And so we have entities that have facilitated this diversity, and they have ancestors that facilitated the diversity, but those are often the same individuals that don't want to have equity with respect to the diversity or inclusion. And so many people want to encroach and they want to take and they want to appropriate, but they don't want to share. They don't want to be fair. They don't want to be equitable. And that is a problem. We cannot have a semi-peaceful existence if we don't have respect. However, individuals who do this sort of encroaching thing, they are not interested in peace. And so that's another problem. If you notice, we have every day these stories of conflicts. Every year there are these stories of conflicts. And part of this is people don't know how to keep their hands to themselves. People don't know how to mind their own business. People don't know how to leave other people alone. And so many people are going around the world bothering folks. Historically, people have gone around the world bothering folks. They have gone around the world taking things because they see it and they want it. This is all pathological. And so what we are living with is a culture, an earth culture of pathology. And if you're wondering what pathology is all about, pathology is another word for suffering. And so a big part of our suffering is tied to this lack of boundaries and this lack of respect. Not only lack of respect for others, but lack of respect for self. And so this is a conversation that we need to perhaps continue, not just us, but collectively in terms of the earth. We need to have some common ground. We need to have some sort of agreement about how we're going to operate with each other in a way that's going to be beneficial for all people, not just discrete groups of people or groups of people that have the power. Remember, knowledge is power.